Good morning, Robin. These statues make Shaq look short. I mean, they are just that big. But these are the Moai. They are an important part of Easter Island and the Rapa Nui people. They are the symbol of this island. There are thousands of them around the coast here, and they've just discovered a new one, or one last week also. But they are under a threat, as is the community here as a whole.
On a remote island in the South Pacific, nearly 1,000 massive stone figures stand watch across the landscape. They are known as the Moai of Easter Island, and for centuries, they have inspired some of the most repeated mysteries in popular history. A claim has been circulating online that no one really knows what they were for, that their purpose is still locked away in the past. But that isn't quite right. Archaeologists have been studying these statues for generations, and what they have found is far more grounded and arguably more interesting than the viral version suggests. Why the mystery story keeps spreading. Easter Island, known to its indigenous people as Rapa Nui, sits roughly 3,700 kilometers off the coast of Chile. It is one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. That isolation, combined with the sheer scale of the stone figures, has made the island a natural magnet for speculation. Online, you will find a steady stream of claims. Some say the Moai were built by visitors from elsewhere. Others suggest they are markers of a lost advanced civilization or part of some hidden global energy grid that mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge. A milder version simply insists that no one knows who carved them, how they were moved, or why so many were made. It is easy to see why these ideas travel. The statues are enormous. Some stand more than 10 meters tall. They are carved from solid volcanic stone. They line the coast in long rows with uniform faces, gazing inland over what was once a thriving community. Photographed at sunset, they look almost staged, as if they were placed by something other than the people who actually lived there. So the imagination fills in the gap. What the viral claim usually says. The most common online framings tend to share a few features. They suggest the Moai's purpose is completely unknown. They imply that modern science has no working explanation. They sometimes hint that the Rapa Nui people themselves could not have produced these monuments without outside help. And they often present this as a quiet secret, something archaeologists are reluctant to discuss openly. That framing does not match what researchers actually say. The Rapa Nui people are clearly identified as the builders. The construction methods, the cultural meaning, and even some of the transport techniques have been studied in detail. There are still open questions, and we will get to those, but the basic story is not a mystery. It is the result of careful archaeology, oral history, and decades of careful work on the island itself.
What's the most interesting thing that you have learned about the statues?
I think just the way that they were made and the fact how they slid them down the hill and the way that they walked them into place. I just found that to be fascinating because of the ingenuity of the people here on this small island.
Who built the Moai? The Moai were carved by the Rapa Nui, a Polynesian people who settled the island after long voyages across the open Pacific. The exact date of arrival is debated, with most estimates falling somewhere between roughly 1100 and 1200 AD, although some researchers have argued for earlier or later dates. What is well supported is that statue building flourished for several centuries, with the major period of Moai production running from around 1100 to 1600 AD. These were not anonymous craftspeople. The Rapa Nui developed a complex society with chiefly lineages, ceremonial sites, agricultural systems, and a religious tradition centered on ancestors and sacred places. The statues were not produced in spite of that society. They were a direct expression of it. This is one of the points where viral claims most often go astray. The premise that the Rapa Nui could not have built the Moai underestimates a culture that successfully colonized one of the most remote islands on the planet, sustained itself there for centuries, and developed a tradition of monumental sculpture that is unmatched in scale among Pacific societies. Where the statues were made, we know where the Moai were carved because the quarry is still there. Most of them came from a single location, an extinct volcanic crater on the eastern side of the island called Rano Raraku. The crater walls and slopes are made of a soft volcanic stone called tuff, ideal for carving with the tools available to the Rapa Nui. What makes Rano Raraku especially valuable to researchers is that the work was never finished. Hundreds of statues remain at the quarry in different stages of completion. Some are still attached to the bedrock, half emerged from the rock face. Others stand upright, finished but never transported. A few were broken during carving and abandoned in place. This unfinished landscape is essentially an open-air workshop. It shows the steps, the outline of a figure scratched into the rock, the body and head shaped while still attached, the careful undercutting that separated the statue from the cliff, the temporary upright placement for finishing details. Anyone who has visited or studied the site can trace the production process directly. That is not a mystery. It is one of the best preserved records of stone monument construction anywhere in the world. What the statues represent. So if we know who carved them and where, the next question is the one viral posts most often skip. Why? The most widely accepted explanation among researchers is that the Moai represent ancestors. In Rapa Nui culture, important ancestors and chiefly figures were believed to carry mana, a spiritual power that could continue to influence the living after death. Carving a stone figure of an ancestor, placing it at a sacred site, and orienting it toward the community was a way of channeling that power into the well-being of the people who lived there. This interpretation is supported by several independent strands of evidence. Oral traditions recorded after European contact describe the statues as representations of ancestors. The placement of the Moai, which we will look at next, is consistent with that role. And the broader Polynesian cultural context includes similar, though smaller scale, traditions of ancestor-focused monuments and shrines. In other words, the Moai were not abstract art. They were not random. They were not unexplained. They were carved people, made of stone, set in places where the community could feel watched over by those who had come before. How they were placed. If you look at maps of the Moai locations, a clear pattern appears. The vast majority of the standing statues face inland. They were placed along the coastline, but their gaze was directed back toward the villages and farmland that supported daily life. This orientation matters. If the statues were simply meant to impress passing visitors or mark the edge of the island, you would expect them to face the sea. They do not. They face the people. That is consistent with the ancestor interpretation. The carved ancestors were not looking outward at strangers. They were looking inward at their descendants. There are exceptions. A famous group of 7 Moai at a site called Ahu Akivi face the ocean rather than the land. According to local tradition, these represent 7 explorers, and their seaward gaze fits the story of figures whose role connects to long ocean voyaging. The exception, in other words, has its own coherent explanation. It does not undermine the broader pattern. The Ashu platforms. The statues are only half the story. Most Moai stand on stone platforms called Ahu. These platforms are themselves significant pieces of architecture, carefully constructed and often containing burial chambers or holding human remains. Ahu were ceremonial centers as much as supports. Families and lineages built and maintained their own Ahu, and the statues placed on them appear to have been associated with specific ancestors or leaders connected to that lineage. The platform was the sacred ground. The statue was the figure standing upon it. Together, they formed a place where the living could come to mark important events and where the spiritual presence of the ancestors was concentrated. This combination, statue plus platform plus burial site, is one of the strongest pieces of evidence that the Moai were part of a living religious system rather than mysterious objects of unknown purpose. They sit inside a clearly defined ritual landscape, that runs all the way around the island. How the statues were moved. This is the question that has fueled more speculation than almost any other. Some moai weigh more than 80 tons. They were carved at Rano-Raraku and then transported, in many cases, several kilometers to their final platforms across uneven terrain. How? Researchers have proposed several methods over the years, including dragging the statues on wooden sleds or rolling them on logs. The interpretation that has gained the most ground in recent decades, though, is sometimes called the walking theory. Experiments by researchers, including Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, working with engineering colleagues, have shown that a moai can be moved upright by a relatively small team using ropes. By attaching ropes to either side of the head and pulling rhythmically, the statue can be rocked side to side and edged forward in a movement that looks remarkably like a person walking. Field experiments with full-size replicas have demonstrated that this method works even on rough ground. What strengthens this interpretation further is that it matches Rapa Nui oral tradition. Local accounts have long described the statues as having walked from the quarry to their platforms. For a long time, those accounts were treated as poetic rather than literal. The walking experiments suggest the tradition may have been describing the actual technique in vivid but accurate language. That does not mean every moai was moved this way. The transport methods may have varied with terrain, statue size, and time period, but the central point stands. The movement of the moai is not unexplained. It is explainable through known Polynesian engineering, human coordination, and ropes with no need for outside intervention. A quick note before we continue. If you appreciate this kind of careful evidence-first storytelling, take a moment to subscribe. We dig into claims like this regularly, separating viral interpretations from what the research actually supports, and we would love to have you along for the next investigation. What the evidence does not support. Now that the grounded picture is in place, it is worth being clear about what the evidence does not back up. There is no archaeological case for alien involvement. There are no anomalous materials at the quarry, no tool marks that fall outside known stone working techniques, and no objects that require an explanation beyond Polynesian craftsmanship. The Rano-Raraku site, with its hundreds of unfinished statues, is itself the strongest argument against any non-human explanation. You can watch the production process unfold across the slopes. There is no evidence of a lost advanced civilization predating the Rapa Nui on the island. The settlement record, the genetic record, and the linguistic record all point to a Polynesian origin consistent with the broader settlement of the Pacific. There is no support for the idea that the moai are part of a global energy grid or hidden technological network. These claims tend to rely on selective placement of dots on a map rather than on physical or archaeological evidence at the site itself. And there is no credible reason to think the Rapa Nui could not have built the moai. Every line of evidence shows that they did, with the materials, tools, and social organization available to them.
Wow.
Standing beside these statues in person is truly awe-inspiring.
Unbelievable.
And to the people here, these massive monolithic carvings are much more than statues.
Why the statues still feel mysterious? If the basic story is so well supported, why does the mystery framing keep coming back? Part of the answer is scale. Even when you understand how a moai was carved and moved, it is genuinely hard to picture the effort involved. Coordinating teams, feeding workers, sourcing ropes and timber, planning the route, surviving the inevitable accidents, and doing all of this for hundreds of statues over centuries is an enormous achievement. The mystery sometimes feels less like a gap in knowledge and more like awe stretched into doubt. Another part of the answer is cultural loss. Rapa Nui society went through severe disruption, especially in the 1800s, including catastrophic population decline driven in part by Peruvian slave raids and introduced disease. A great deal of detailed knowledge about specific statues, lineages, and ceremonies did not survive that period. So while researchers understand the broad purpose of the Moai, the fine-grained details, which statue belongs to which family, exactly when each was carved, what specific rituals took place at which platform, are often beyond reach. A third factor is simply that the visual experience of the island is striking. Standing in front of a Moai is a powerful thing. It is easy to feel that something so impressive must have a hidden explanation. But the more honest reading is the opposite. The statues are impressive because of what the Rapa Nui did. The mystery, where it remains, is in the details, not in the existence of the figures themselves. What is likely true and what remains uncertain? To make all of this as clear as possible, here is where the evidence currently stands. What is well supported? The Moai were carved by the Rapa Nui people between roughly 1100 and 1600 AD. Most were quarried at Rano Raraku, where unfinished statues still preserve the carving process in detail. The statues represent ancestors and important figures, with mana, the concept of spiritual power, central to their meaning. Most face inland, watching over communities, while a small number, like those at Ahu Akivi, face the sea for reasons consistent with their own traditions. They were placed on Ahu platforms that often served as ceremonial and burial sites. They were moved by human teams using ropes and coordinated effort, with the upright walking technique strongly supported by both experiments and oral tradition. What is still uncertain? The exact identities of individual statues are often unknown. The full timeline of construction, including how it shifted with environmental and social changes on the island, is still being refined. The precise transport method used for any given Moai is not always determinable from what survives. And the way statue building relates to broader ecological and political changes on the island remains an active area of research and debate, but the evidence does not support. There is no credible basis for alien involvement, lost advanced civilizations on Easter Island, hidden global construction projects, or methods that exceed what Polynesian societies are known to have used. Why this understanding actually matters? It is tempting to think that the mystery version is more interesting than the real one. A mystery feels open. An explanation can feel like a door closing. But the Rapa Nui story does the opposite once you take it seriously. The actual history involves people crossing thousands of kilometers of open ocean in wooden canoes, settling one of the most remote places on Earth, building a society there, and choosing to commemorate their dead in stone monuments larger than most modern buildings. They did this without metal tools, without wheels, and without any outside help. They did it through generations of organized effort, religious meaning, and pure human determination. That story is not less impressive than a story about aliens. It is more impressive because it is true. The takeaway. So what are the Easter Island statues really for? The evidence points to a clear answer. The Moai were ancestor figures carved by the Rapa Nui people as part of a religious and social system in which leaders and important kin were memorialized in stone, given a place on the land, and asked to watch over the communities they had once helped to lead. They were placed on ceremonial platforms, oriented toward villages and connected to burial sites. They were quarried at a single major location where the production process remains visible in unfinished form to anyone who walks through it today. They were moved using human ingenuity, ropes, coordination, and almost certainly the upright walking technique that matches both experiments and traditional accounts. The viral claim that their purpose is still unknown is not accurate. The detailed picture is still being refined. The basic picture is well established. Some details are lost and some debates are ongoing, and that is part of how archaeology actually works. But the central question, the one in the title, has an answer. The Moai were built by a remarkable people for reasons rooted in memory, identity, and belief, and they still stand because of what those people built into them. Closing. If you found this useful, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next investigation. We pull apart claims like this one regularly, looking at where the evidence holds where it bends, and where the popular story has run ahead of what can actually be supported. Your support keeps these deep dives possible. Now we want to hear from you. Does understanding the cultural meaning of the Moai change how you see them, knowing they were ancestors carved in stone rather than figures of unknown origin? And do you think future archaeological work will fill in more of the missing details, or are there parts of this story that are simply lost to time? Let us know in the comments below.
The situation across the Eastern Islands remains fluid, and we will continue to provide updates as they emerge. Thank you for joining us this hour.